Hey everybody, Byron here at Cowboys Camp for you guys. Where should I start? I guess the obvious place to start is with Dak Prescott, who had a light practice today. He didn't fully participate in the 11-on-11s, but he did a lot of warming up and throwing with his receivers and running backs. And, you know, the one thing you can see about Dak is that he has no hesitation in the way that he's moving. He's moving very, very aggressively. Doesn't seem like he has any hang-ups physically or mentally from the injury. So that's one of the big things we wanted to see. You know, is this a guy that's going to be moving in the same way we've become accustomed to? And I certainly do think so. You know, the other thing we'd like to really see is Dak's accuracy really took a leap forward last year. And sometimes an injury, especially a lower body injury, can affect your mechanics and maybe throw off your accuracy. So we want to see, you know, if there was any effect on his ball placement or his arm strength today. Overall, you know, in the limited views that we got, the accuracy was pretty good. There was a couple of throws that were off, and you could tell Dak was a little frustrated with himself. But, you know, it looks like something that with a few weeks of just knocking the rust off of, he should be able to take care of. It didn't look like there's any mechanical problems with the way that he's planning on that leg or pushing off of anything of it or anything like that. And in terms of arm strength, you know, what I saw was more than sufficient. He wasn't really cutting it all the way loose today, so you know that we'll be looking out for that. But what I saw was certainly more than still, you know, average NFL arm strength. So hopefully we're going to be good there with Dak. I think the other really interesting thing as far as Dak's concerned is that this Cowboys defense, you know, by all accounts, the insiders here believe this defense is going to be at least a little bit better than it was last year. But based on what I saw today and what I'm hearing, they're still very thin across the defensive line, and the secondary is still leaving a lot to be desired. So if the defense plays this season the way that they look today, the Cowboys are going to have to score a lot of points on offense. These are going to be high-scoring games that they're involved in, and it's good for fantasy. Maybe not great for Cowboys fans to hear, but definitely good for fantasy and good for Dak. I think he's going to be responsible for an offense that has no choice but to attempt to score a lot of points on a given week. And you know, we'll see. A big storyline here is that this team added Keanu Neal and Malik Hooker at the safety position this offseason. Two guys that if you'd said that 3 or 4 years ago, you would have thought this was an all-star, you know, studded set of safeties they have here in Dallas. But fast forward to the present, and both of those safeties still have big question marks. Malik Hooker working out on the off the side today, still kind of coming along slowly. And then Keanu Neal, he did participate in 11-on-11s and got some run, but not as much as I expected. So I think they're bringing both of those guys along slowly. What happens with their development, I do think, can have an enormous impact on this team. So that'll be a narrative that we need to monitor closely as the season approaches. I mean, it stands to reason that at some point those guys should be the starters. But if what we saw today holds up, this Dallas secondary is pretty shaky. It's going to be a nightmare matchup against the Bucs wide receivers in Week 1, and I think it's going to amount to a lot of high-scoring games for these Cowboys, which, again, is maybe not what Cowboys want to hear from a real football perspective. They're fans, but for fantasy, I do think it's going to force the hand of the Cowboys on offense. Amari Cooper out of practice today. It's just kind of the same old things with Amari Cooper year after year, you know, kind of always a little bit banged up. I just think at this point, unless his ADP plummets, just be hands off Amari Cooper. If you're going to go in early on a Cowboys receiver, it should be CeeDee Lamb. He's a bona fide stud. He did work on these DBs all day today. He killed them. So if you're going to even consider going Cowboys wide receiver early, it's Lamb. But truthfully, the prudent choice may just be going with Gallup late in the contract year. He's going to be a big part of this offense, and you can draft him much, much later. So if you want a Cowboys wide receiver, I think he's a guy that you can get pretty comfortable with right now. And then as far as the tight ends are concerned, I'm hearing that Dalton Schultz has a slight edge over Blake Jarwin, but both of those guys are pretty clearly going to play. I think it's going to be a tight end situation. It's mostly you're going to be hands off unless there's an injury involved. And then, you know, just as Schultz was kind of running slightly ahead of Jarwin today, he came off the field with a lower leg injury, and Jarwin kind of picked up the slack. So that's another one we'll have to keep an eye on, but it looks like kind of a tight end by committee in Dallas this year, which is probably not a good fantasy situation. And then last but not least, I know people want to know if Tony Pollard is going to get more involved this year. It seems that he should, but based on what I saw at practice today, it's pretty clear to me that Zeke is still far and away the lead dog. And it's interesting because when you see Tony Pollard come on the field, he just moves differently than Zeke. He's a slasher, and he moves very, very smoothly and efficiently, and he's got a little more quickness to his first step than Zeke does. So I know a lot of people would like to see more of him, especially in the passing game. He had a bad drop. It was only one drop today, but it was a bad drop. Certainly not what you want to see out of Pollard for a guy who's trying to earn more time in that capacity. But I do think at this point it's safe to say Zeke is still very much in the driver's seat there, and Pollard primarily looked like a handcuff to me today at practice. All right, Roster Watch Nation, until next time, so long.